How hair cells work. These hair cells are important processes. These hair cells allow for them to either move one direction or the other. Their structure is very specific and have very specific amounts of fluid that they're filled in. So the endolymph is associated with the top portions of the hair cells. Perilymph is associated with the bottom portion of the cell. What is special about endolymph is its high potassium concentration. Its high potassium concentration is different than other areas in the body where you usually have the high potassium concentration inside the cell versus outside the cell. Perilymph is more normal in nature, in which it has a low potassium concentration. So what do these two different potassium concentrations allow for then the signal process to work? Well, a sound wave is going to be traveling down the membrane, pushing on this tactile membrane that will push down against the hair cells. As it pushes down against the hair cells will deflect. As the hair cells deflect, potassium is allowed to rush into those hair cells. Why does potassium want to rush in? Because the endolymph has such high potassium concentration, there's a gradient between the endolymph and the cell itself. Membrane potential depolarizes. This opens up calcium channels. This calcium influx causes synaptic vesicles which have glutamate in them to be released. Therefore, this whole process is set up by potassium entering into the cell to cause depolarization. It is then the release of glutamate that is stimulatory to the next nerve that will transmit the information back to the brain. You might ask, what happens to the potassium? The potassium exits the cell into the perilymph and then is recycled and brought back to the endolymph. Sound frequency mapping. So now that you understand how a hair cell works, we can then bring in more information about how you hear different sounds. And different sounds, of course, have different frequencies, from a high sound to a low sound. These different sounds give you the insight into how a particular wave is coming through. So you have hair cells located from the base all the way to the apex. These will now be responsive to different frequencies. If you have a high frequency sound, this is going to stimulate the membrane closer to the base. This high frequency sound is because of the greater amount of frequency, not talking about amplitude here, frequency, so it's occurring through a large number of frequency waves. Will hit the hair cells closer to the base. Sounds that are lower frequency have a slower wave. Those will travel in further into the membrane before they will hit a hair cell. That is how you will distinguish between a high pitch and a low pitch, is where the wave comes in to stimulate those particular hair cells associated with a depression in the membrane.